Welcome agents, the Division 2 private beta has come to an end and many of you will have decided whether this game is worth purchasing or not. Before you decide, my question to you is, what is your biggest concern and how important is that to you? Today I want to talk about my biggest concern and why it's very important to me. If you enjoy this one, please hit the like button to show your support and subscribe for dedicated Division 2 content. With that said, let's do this. First and foremost, it's worth mentioning that this is my opinion and what's important to me, so it may not bother you at all, which is fine of course. Yesterday I streamed for about 2 hours on YouTube where I talked about PvP within the Division 2. I had only played about 3 matches of skirmish and been in the dark zone no longer than a couple of hours when I started that stream, so my exposure to the PvP within the Division 2 was limited. With that said, as a content creator for the Division, I had heard a lot of pros and cons of PvP, so I had already made my mind up before actually playing PvP in the Division 2. The Division 2's PvP is my biggest concern, and what makes it worse is 95% of my 3,000 plus hours in the Division were playing PvP game modes like Skirmish or Roam in the Dark Zone, so it has to be good in the Division 2 for me. What is difficult for me is I can't quite put my finger on why I'm not totally sold by the PvP and what it is that's causing this concern. To me, the PvP just feels unfinished. It's very clear that the devs have almost entirely focused on the PvE aspect of the game, and you can really feel that when you play the endgame, which isn't a bad thing, but it feels like PvP was the last thing on the list to sort of get any love. So, is there anything specifically that I really don't like about PvP? Now, I realise we only played the beta, but the one map we got to play for Skirmish was really bad. It felt like everyone did the same thing. You spawn, run to the middle building, and get on the roof. Camp and hold the roof, and if you're killed, you spawn and you run back to the roof. And you kind of just did the same thing over and over again. The 3-lane map design is pretty common in most PvP games, so that's fine, but I really don't like how it basically became control of the roof. What makes it worse is because it was on a roof that you were trying to control, whoever had control had a huge advantage over the opposing team with height on their side and choke points and all that sort of stuff. And that's not the only thing I didn't like about the map though. Numerous times I would spawn and players would be just sitting outside the spawn with turrets placed, Seekers rolling, and those 10 seconds of invulnerability you get go very quickly. It was only when your team were truly overrun that you would spawn on the other side of the map, and the spawning just felt wrong in PvP as well. Now, not directly related to PvP, but what really affected the PvP for me were the skills that you were able to equip and use. The Seeker Mines did far too much damage to your armour, and were actually quite difficult to see and shoot down if you did see them coming. I'm not sure if they had too much health or they had really small hitboxes, but I had real trouble taking those down when I did know they were on their way. Now, these little rolling balls of death would take off about 2/3 of your armour, or if you only had like half armour left, then you would pretty much downed instantly. It kind of reminded me of the one-shot Seeker meta from the Division, and we all know how bad that was. So, on the topic of skills, they're far too clunky for PvP, and with a lower time to kill, I found a lot of the time I was dropping my skills prematurely, preempting the gunfight rather than using them in the heat of the fight. The skills rarely had any impact during a fight, and I wish that wasn't the case. The only time that skills became popular, or not popular, were useful was when you threw Seekers, and then you're not really shooting at anyone, you're just sat in cover waiting for Seekers to do their job. But most of the time you'd just be engaging in a gunfight, and they really wouldn't make any difference. Now, how the skills have been implemented in the game clearly favour the more methodical, team-based PvE environment the developers wanted to make. And that's fine, but as a result, PvP has come in last place, meaning a lot of the fanbase who stayed with the Division until the end will have a hard time enjoying PvP in the Division 2. Moving on, and I've talked about this before, but snipers and shotguns kind of ruined Skirmish in the beta for me. Again, they are clearly balanced for PvE, I mean they're absolutely fine in there, but it appears there was no consideration for PvP, and maybe that's what the developers wanted. Maybe the Division 2 will just have PvP and that's it really, and the main and only focus will be PvE. I mean that's definitely not a bad direction to take the game, and probably the best direction when you consider most people play the Division for PvE and not for PvP. Outside of skirmish, the Dark Zone is just okay for me, and there are some problems I'm sure you've already heard about, but I'll briefly talk about just one of them or a couple of them. The turrets and the checkpoints need to be drastically changed. In one instance, I died whilst rogue and spawned back at the checkpoint. My teammate was still alive, so when I exited the checkpoint, I immediately went rogue. There was no sort of countdown for rogue like I've seen before, and the problem was I was stood in the Dark Zone outside a checkpoint whilst rogue, so the turrets immediately locked on and downed me. I don't know if this is an oversight or there was an issue, because I've seen it sometimes where people have come out of checkpoints and then you kind of like triangulate with your team and it gives you about, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds, but that didn't happen in this instance. So whether that's an oversight by the devs or not, I don't completely know, but it is something that needs to be addressed at launch if it's not. PvP in the Dark Zone for the Division 2 doesn't feel like PvP in the Dark Zone for the Division 1, and not in a good way, I don't think. I say I don't think because I actually had some fun times in the beta playing solo. I went manhunt solo and died numerous times by the same person who clearly had a much better aim than me, and my teammate at the time who they downed as well. And that was fine. Going back to the checkpoint and hunting down this person who killed me again and again was fun, because eventually we got him and it felt rewarding. It felt challenging. With that said though, the PvP itself still felt like it did in skirmish, slow and sluggish, but in a much better environment. I could say a lot more about Dark Zone in general, but I don't really want to go off topic. What I've learned and said numerous times in this video is the Division 2 is very clearly a PvE game with some PvP in there. The Division 1 felt like a mixture of both, and I think anyone who is a hardcore PvP player will likely not enjoy the changes that have been made here, and that's probably why I'm very much on the fence with this. My main concern with PvP being the way it is right now is a lot of the reasons why I stuck around with the Division, and I think many people did, was for the PvP. With that said, the balancing issues can be easily fixed. The devs confirmed some time ago that they will be able to balance both PvE and PvP separately, meaning the Seeker Mines will certainly catch a nerf for PvP along with shotguns and snipers before launch day. Other than that though, everything else is kind of like the core mechanics with the game, so it's likely these are not going to change at all. PvP in the Division 2 feels much slower, much more methodical and team-based, but unfinished and not well thought through. It feels to me like PvP has just been put in the game to please the people who enjoy PvP. Last but not least, the developers have really focused on the more tactical, cover-based shooter here instead of the face-tanking playstyle of the Division. So why does PvP still feel like it's not cover-based? Maybe it's just because people are used to playing PvP in the Division that almost every game I played in skirmished, people didn't stay in cover and ran straight at the enemy. It's obvious from the time to kill and the armor and health changes that PvP is meant to be played in a more cover-based way, but I just think it could become very boring and very stale very quickly. And this was my main concern with PvP before I had a chance to play it myself. People sat in cover with a high time to kill, no one wanted to rush out, and it's just, to me it's just very stale, very boring. And that's my concern, is that this is going to be PvP in the Division 2. In all honesty, agents, this was actually a really difficult video for me to make, to be honest, because I really did struggle to put my finger on what it is about PvP in the Division 2 I'm concerned about. But something to me just doesn't feel right. And I try not to make any sort of negative videos, but on the other hand, I'm sure a lot of you feel this way too, and I want to keep it real with you all. With all of this said though, it would appear the devs have really nailed the PvE aspect of the game, so overall, I think we can say the Division 2 beta was successful, and the Division 2 will be a successful PvE game at launch too. I hope the new PvP maps we are getting will be better than the one in the beta, and I hope the devs take on board all of the feedback and do their best to make PvP more fun, because ultimately, that's what it's all about. And I think that's why I'm so on the fence actually. PvP doesn't feel fun in the Division 2 as it stands. It feels like it's just there for the sake of it. They just needed PvP in the game for it to sell more. As bad as the Division 1 was with its balancing, insta-heals and all that other stuff, the Division 1 PvP was fun most of the time. Definitely in Update 1.7, so let's hope the devs can bring some fun to the Division 2 PvP. There you are, agents. Thanks very much for watching. I am starting to get some serious withdrawals from the Division already, but I'm actually having a lot of fun playing Apex Legends, which surprised me because I don't like any other Battle Royale game there is, but this seems to have really taken a hold of me a little bit. If you want to see some Apex Legends on the channel, please leave a comment down below and like the video so I can see whether that will be something I could perhaps upload alongside the Division 2 or certainly leading up to launch. Thanks again for all your support, and until the next one, Epic out.